I've always loved the solitude of my little house nestled on the edge of the woods. It's a quaint, isolated place where the world feels far away, and the only sounds are the rustling leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird. There's something comforting about living in a quiet neighborhood, where everyone knows each other and nothing ever seems to disturb the peace. I often take long walks down the winding roads, savoring the fresh air and the sweet scent of pine. But lately, there's been a shift in the air. News reports about violent home invasions in nearby towns have seeped into our community like a dark cloud. I can't help but feel the unease settling over the neighborhood like a heavy fog. The chatter among my neighbors has grown frantic, whispers of fear shared over garden fences and at the grocery store. I've seen the way they look at me, as if wondering why I still live in such an isolated place, but I brush off their concern. I tell myself that I'm safe here, tucked away from the chaos of the city. After all, my house is my sanctuary. I follow my usual routine, pouring myself a cup of coffee each morning and settling into the cozy corner of my living room, lost in the pages of my favorite book. I want to believe that the intruders won't come this far, that the tranquility of my home is enough to keep me safe. Yet, as night falls, an unsettling feeling lingers in the back of my mind. I lock the doors, draw the curtains tightly, and try to ignore the nagging sense of dread that creeps in with the darkness. But as I snuggle into bed, I can't shake the thought that perhaps my little haven isn't as secure as I once believed. The storm rolled in like a dark wave, the wind howling as if warning me of the chaos to come. I curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, trying to find solace in the flickering glow of the television. The rain pounded against the windows, a rhythmic drumming that should have been comforting, but instead, it only heightened my anxiety. It started subtly at first. The lights above me flickered as if they were trying to convey a message. I attributed it to the storm, dismissing the way they danced erratically. But when the creaking of the floorboards echoed through the house, I felt my heart skip a beat. I told myself it was just the house settling, a natural sound that accompanied old homes like mine. Yet, as the night deepened, the unsettling noises outside became more pronounced. Was it just the wind? Or something, or someone, lurking in the shadows? My eyes darted to the windows, the rain streaking down like fingers clawing at the glass, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, prickling with a strange, electric tension. I tried to dismiss the paranoia, reasoning with myself. "It's just the storm," I whispered, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to my ears. I picked up my phone, scrolling through social media as a distraction, but the comfort of my screen did little to ease the tightening knot in my stomach. Then, the phone rang. The sound pierced through the storm, jarring me from my thoughts. I snatched it up, my heart racing. "Hello?" I answered, my voice echoing into the empty silence on the other end. Nothing. Just an eerie stillness, heavy and suffocating. My pulse quickened as I repeated my greeting, but only silence greeted me. I hung up, feeling a chill creep down my spine. I glanced at the door, half expecting to see a figure standing just outside, cloaked in darkness. I forced myself to breathe, but every sound, the wind, the rain, the creaking of the house, felt amplified, as if they were all part of a sinister symphony. I could no longer ignore the gnawing sensation that I was not alone, that something was out there, watching and waiting. As the storm raged outside, my unease deepened into something more sinister. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was alive with an energy that made my skin crawl. Every creak of the floorboards echoed ominously, each gust of wind felt like a whisper of warning, and I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. I decided to distract myself by moving to the kitchen, hoping the act of preparing some warm tea would soothe my frazzled nerves. But as I reached for the window to check the weather outside, my heart dropped. The kitchen window was slightly ajar, the latch unlatched as if someone had been there, testing the strength of my home's defenses. I slammed it shut, a jolt of adrenaline coursing through me. Had I left it open? I couldn't remember. My pulse raced as I scanned the room, my gaze falling to the floor. My stomach churned as I noticed muddy footprints leading away from the window. I followed the trail, panic rising with every step. They led into the living room, where the scattered magazines and books from my coffee table were now strewn across the floor. My heart pounded louder in my ears, drowning out the storm's fury outside. Something wasn't right. I knew my house too well. I kept it tidy, a sanctuary from the chaos of the world. But now, it felt as if a dark presence had invaded my space, turning my haven into a haunting ground. I could feel it in my bones, something was terribly wrong. My eyes darted around the room, searching for anything else out of place. That's when I saw it. On the wall near the fireplace, scrawled in what looked like dirt, were cryptic symbols, lines and circles that sent a chill through me. It felt deliberate, as if the intruder was leaving a message. I backed away, my breath quickening as the implications of the situation settled in. He wasn't outside. He was already inside my house, playing a twisted game. My heart raced as I pieced together the clues he had left behind, the symbols hinting at his next move. My mind raced, oscillating between fear and the desperate need to understand what was happening. I felt like a puppet on a string, and he was the puppeteer, pulling me deeper into his dark world. My sanctuary had become a maze, and every moment I lingered, I risked walking right into his trap. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was no longer safe. I was being hunted. Just as I began to process the horror unfolding around me, the atmosphere shifted, thickening with a palpable tension that made my breath catch in my throat. I was no longer just a frightened woman in her home. I was prey, and the predator had revealed himself. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway, slow and deliberate, each step a taunt that made my skin crawl. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to listen. "Emma," a voice called out, low and mocking. "I see you found my little messages." My heart raced as panic gripped me, but I couldn't afford to let fear paralyze me. I glanced around the living room, searching for a way out, but every exit felt like a trap. The shadows seemed to dance around me, dark shapes swirling with the flickering candlelight, and I knew I had to move. I darted into the kitchen, the only place that felt somewhat familiar in this nightmare. I grabbed a knife from the counter, feeling the cold steel against my palm, a small comfort amid the chaos. The footsteps grew louder, reverberating through the silence, and I realized he was getting closer. "Why are you hiding?" he taunted, his voice dripping with sadistic glee. "You should be flattered. I've watched you for so long, Emma. It's time to play." I took a deep breath and forced myself to focus. I had to outsmart him, use the knowledge of my own home to my advantage. I slipped through the kitchen door leading to the basement, a dark, winding space that I rarely ventured into. As I descended the stairs, I felt the chill of the air wrap around me, the darkness pressing in like a living entity. Once at the bottom, I paused, straining to hear his movements above me. Silence enveloped the space, broken only by the distant sound of rain tapping against the windows. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a relentless reminder that I was running out of time. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from the kitchen, followed by a fit of laughter that sent chills racing down my spine. "You think you can hide from me?" he shouted. "I know all your secrets, Emma. I know every place you feel safe." I crept deeper into the basement, desperate to find something, anything, that could give me an edge. But all I found were shadows and remnants of the past, old boxes and cobwebs clinging to the walls like ghosts of memories. Then, in the corner of my eye, I spotted something gleaming. I approached cautiously, my heart racing, and found a baseball bat lying beneath a pile of dust. I picked it up, feeling its weight, and a surge of determination flooded through me. I could no longer be the hunted. With the bat gripped tightly in my hands, I started to make my way back upstairs, ready to confront him. But as I reached the top, I noticed something written on the wall in what looked like my own blood. "You can run, but you can't hide." A wave of nausea hit me, but I pushed through, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had to find him before he found me again. Each room in my house became a battleground, and as I moved from one to the next, I felt the oppressive weight of his gaze on me, like a predator stalking its prey. The game had begun, and I was determined to come out alive. My heart pounded in my chest as I moved cautiously through the dimly lit rooms, each shadow a potential hiding place for the monster that had invaded my home. I could feel his presence lurking just beyond my sight, taunting me with every creak of the floorboards. I knew I had to act quickly. There was no way I could let him corner me again. As I turned a corner into the hallway, I saw him at the end, framed by the flickering lights. His eyes gleamed with a manic intensity that sent chills down my spine. "There you are, Emma," he sneered, advancing slowly, the predatory smile on his face sending waves of terror crashing over me. "I've been waiting for this moment." Panic surged within me, but I forced myself to remain calm. I thought of all the times I had walked these halls, memorized the nooks and crannies, the places I could use to my advantage. I spotted the staircase leading to the attic, the only way I could think of to gain some height and possibly get the upper hand. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I sprinted toward the stairs. He lunged after me, but I was faster. I climbed quickly, my heart racing, and as I reached the attic, I slammed the door shut behind me, barricading it with an old trunk. I could hear him banging on the door, his frustration echoing through the small space. But I wasn't out of options yet. The attic was cluttered with old furniture and forgotten belongings, and in the corner, I noticed a dusty old toolbox. I rummaged through it, my hands shaking, until I found a rusty hammer. It wasn't much, but it felt heavy and reassuring in my grip. I could hear him growling from behind the door, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. "You can't hide forever," he shouted. "You're just prolonging the inevitable." Determined to turn the tables, I quietly made my way to a window at the far end of the attic. It was small and covered in grime, but it overlooked the yard below. I had to act fast. He was bound to break through any moment. As I braced myself, I heard the door splintering beneath the weight of his relentless assault. I climbed onto a rickety shelf and pushed the window open, adrenaline surging through me as I prepared to jump. Just as I swung my legs over the ledge, the door burst open, and he charged in, eyes wild with rage. I leaped out, landing awkwardly but safely on the ground below. Pain shot through my ankle, but I couldn't stop. I ran toward the tree line, the darkness swallowing me whole. I glanced back to see him standing in the window, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the attic, an angry roar escaping his lips. "Run, Emma. Run," he bellowed, and I felt the weight of his obsession bearing down on me, a reminder that this wasn't over. I darted into the forest, branches scratching at my arms and legs, the sounds of the storm drowning out my breathless gasps. But just as I thought I'd lost him, I heard it, a rustling in the bushes behind me, the unmistakable sound of someone following. My heart sank. I could hear him calling out, his voice echoing through the trees. "You can't escape me, Emma. I will always find you." With every ounce of strength I had left, I pushed forward, determined to escape this nightmare. But as I ran deeper into the woods, I realized something chilling. This was only the beginning. I might have escaped him for now, but his twisted obsession would always be a part of me. I stumbled into the clearing, panting and terrified, my mind racing with thoughts of what he would do next. As I glanced back toward the darkness, I could have sworn I saw a figure lurking just beyond the tree line, waiting patiently for me to let my guard down. I had escaped for now, but I knew the horror was far from over. I had always thought of my hometown as a place of comfort, where the streets were lined with memories of laughter and childhood adventures. But as I drove down the familiar roads, the weight of grief clung to me like a heavy fog, suffocating any nostalgia that dared to surface. It had been 2 years since I had left, 2 years since that horrific night when my younger sister Lily was taken from us in a brutal act of violence. The police had labeled it an unsolved home invasion, as if those words could somehow ease the horror of her death. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was lurking beneath the surface. The officers had assured me there was nothing more they could do, just another statistic in a long line of unsolved crimes. But for me, Lily's murder was a gaping wound that refused to heal, leaving me restless and haunted by the silence of unanswered questions. Returning to our old home felt like stepping into a ghost story, the walls echoing with memories of happier times. I parked in the driveway, staring at the house that once felt so warm and inviting, now a hollow shell filled with shadows of the past. Every creak of the wooden floorboards reminded me of the life that had been abruptly snatched away. As I stepped inside, the air was thick with dust and despair, and I couldn't help but feel that I was being watched. I had come back to seek answers, to understand why someone would take my sister from us, but as I moved through the rooms, I felt the weight of her absence. The walls seemed to close in around me, filled with images of her laughter, her spirit. But each memory was tainted with the harsh reality that she was gone, and I was left to grapple with the shadows of my own thoughts. I took a deep breath, trying to muster the courage to face the truth, whatever that may be. This was not just a homecoming, it was a pilgrimage to the heart of my nightmares. I needed to confront the ghosts of my past, to find a way to bring closure to the unspeakable horror that had shattered my life. But as I moved deeper into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was waiting for me, lurking just out of sight, ready to reveal itself when I least expected it. It didn't take long for the unease to creep in, like an unwelcome guest settling into the corners of my mind. At first, it was small things, subtle disturbances that I tried to brush off as the echoes of my own grief. A book that had been placed on the shelf was suddenly on the floor, the pages fluttering as if someone had been rifling through it. The bathroom light flickered, casting long shadows on the walls, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a figure standing just out of view in the hallway. But it was the doors that truly unsettled me. I made a point of locking every entrance before bed, but each morning I would wake to find one of them ajar. The front door, which I was certain I had bolted shut, stood wide open, the wind rustling through the empty rooms like a whispering ghost. I tried to convince myself that I was simply forgetful, but deep down, an icy grip of paranoia began to tighten around my chest. Then came the texts. It started innocently enough, a single message late one night, an unknown number flashing on my phone screen. I hesitated before opening it, the small thrill of curiosity battling the rising tide of dread. When I finally did, my heart dropped. There, in the dim light of my phone, was a photo of my living room, taken from a corner of the room I couldn't see from where I slept. The angle was unsettling, capturing the way shadows danced against the walls in a way that felt alive. I didn't know how someone could have gotten in without my knowledge. It sent chills down my spine, a clear sign that I was not alone. I tried to shake it off, thinking it was a cruel prank, but then the photos kept coming. Every night, without fail, another message would arrive, each one more disturbing than the last. In one image, the hallway was dark, the shadow of a figure stretched against the wall, as if it had been waiting for me to emerge. In another, the kitchen door stood open, the light from outside spilling in, illuminating the dust particles swirling in the air, but something dark loomed just beyond the threshold, a silhouette that seemed to watch me. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I scrolled through the images, my palms growing clammy. These weren't just random shots, they were taken while I slept. Whoever was sending them knew my patterns, my routines. They knew which areas of the house I avoided. There were corners I couldn't bear to look at, places that reminded me of Lily, and in those photos, the darkness seemed to pulse, almost taunting me. Each image filled me with dread, and I felt the walls of my childhood home closing in, suffocating me with memories that I couldn't escape. I had returned seeking answers, but instead, I had opened a door to a nightmare I couldn't understand, and with every passing night, I felt more trapped, more hunted. The shadows that once brought comfort now held secrets that felt all too real, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was closer than I had ever imagined. At first, I tried to rationalize what was happening. Maybe it was just a cruel prank from someone in town, a way to toy with me as I returned to face my demons. I could picture a few old classmates snickering over their phones, sharing my fear for their amusement. But the detail in each photo was too precise to be mere coincidence. It was as if the photographer had been right there with me, observing my every move. The unease settled like a weight on my chest. I found myself glancing over my shoulder, convinced I was being watched. The very walls of my childhood home, once a sanctuary, had morphed into something menacing. Every creak and whisper echoed in my mind, turning the house into a labyrinth of paranoia. In a desperate bid for control, I set up security cameras throughout the house, positioning them in the hallways and facing the doors, hoping to catch the elusive intruder. It felt like a futile effort, but I needed to do something. I needed proof, something concrete to grasp onto amidst the chaos of my thoughts. Each morning, I would replay the footage, heart racing as I waited for a glimpse of someone lurking in the shadows. But what I saw only deepened my anxiety. The videos were filled with static silence, broken only by the occasional flicker of movement that sent chills racing down my spine. Shadows danced at the edge of the frames, twisting and contorting as if alive, but nothing ever revealed a clear figure. It was maddening, and I found myself losing precious hours of sleep, driven by an insatiable need to uncover the truth. As the days passed, the frequency of the anonymous photos escalated. Instead of one each night, I began receiving multiple messages throughout the day, each one more disturbing than the last. The darkness seemed to close in around me, and my mind spiraled into an obsessive frenzy. I began to map out each image, trying to find patterns, any hint of where the sender could be hiding or who they might be. I became consumed by the hunt. My conversations grew short, my friends faded into the background, and the world outside blurred into a distant memory. It was just me and the shadows, a constant battle against an unseen foe. I started to see faces in the dark, figures that flickered just beyond my vision. Every creak in the night felt like a whisper, taunting me, reminding me of my sister's absence. I wanted to believe that I was overreacting, that this was just the product of a mind frayed by grief and sleepless nights, but I could no longer distinguish between reality and my imagination. I was trapped in a world where paranoia thrived, and every dark corner held the possibility of danger. I had come back for answers, but all I found was a chilling descent into madness, and the fear that I might be the next victim in a game I never wanted to play. It was a particularly restless night when I stumbled upon the clue that would change everything. I was scrolling through the latest barrage of photos, eyes bleary and heart heavy with anxiety. My hands trembled as I swiped through each image, each one pulling me deeper into despair. Then, in one of the photos taken from the shadowed corner of the living room, something caught my eye, a small, familiar object peeking out from behind the couch. It was Lily's old stuffed bear, its fur worn and faded. I hadn't seen it in years, thought it lost in the chaos that followed her death. My stomach dropped. How could the person taking these photos have found it? I racked my brain, trying to recall if I had mentioned the bear to anyone since my return, but I hadn't. The weight of realization began to settle over me. This was no random act of violence. This was personal. Desperate for answers, I dove into the family archives, digging through old photographs and documents in search of anything that could illuminate the darkness surrounding Lily's murder. As I sifted through faded memories, a chilling pattern emerged. I found a picture of my family taken years ago during a summer picnic, and there, standing awkwardly in the background, was a figure I hadn't thought of in ages, Max, my childhood friend. Max had been an inseparable part of our lives until a series of strange events led to him disappearing from our circle. I remembered whispers about him, rumors that he had been getting into trouble, but we had all moved on, convinced it was just a phase. I never imagined he could have returned, much less be connected to Lily's death. The more I uncovered, the more it became clear that Lily's murder was not an isolated incident. It was part of a much darker narrative intertwined with our childhood. Max had always been fascinated with the macabre, a passion that had pushed him to the fringes of our lives. I couldn't help but wonder if his fascination had taken a twisted turn, leading him to seek revenge or fulfill some dark fantasy at my sister's expense. With each new piece of information, a terrifying realization began to set in. The person responsible for the photos, and for Lily's murder, had been watching me all along, biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The shadow I had felt lurking in the corners of my home was not just an intruder, but a ghost from my past. My heart raced as I connected the dots, dread settling into my bones. This was no longer just about uncovering the truth for closure. It was about survival. Max had not just watched from the sidelines. He had orchestrated this entire game, his presence a dark shadow over my life, and I was now trapped in his twisted web. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance. I was a target, and it was only a matter of time before he made his move. As the realization hit me, I felt the walls closing in tighter, the shadows stretching further. The past was not done with me yet, and I had to act fast if I wanted to escape the nightmare that had taken root in my home. The weight of my discoveries hung heavy in the air, a palpable tension that twisted in my gut as I pieced together the fragments of my shattered reality. I could no longer ignore the feeling that I was being played, a pawn in a game orchestrated by someone I had once trusted. Max had been lurking in the shadows all along, manipulating me, drawing me back to a place filled with pain and terror. That night, as the darkness settled in, I sat in the dim glow of my laptop, going over the final photos once more. My heart raced as I scrolled through the images. Each one felt like a punch to the gut, but one stood out above the rest, a haunting picture taken from just outside my bedroom door. The frame captured a dark figure, his outline barely discernible in the shadows, but I knew who it was. My breath hitched as I recognized the unmistakable stance, the way he lingered just beyond my threshold, watching, waiting. Panic surged through me, and I felt the walls of the house closing in, the shadows twisting into forms that felt all too real. I could almost hear the whispers of my childhood, the laughter and warmth replaced by the chilling reality of my situation. I was not safe here, I never had been. Max was close, and he had come to finish what he started. Adrenaline pumped through my veins as I sprang into action. I needed to escape. I grabbed my car keys and made a beeline for the front door, but the moment my hand touched the handle, I hesitated. The house felt alive, as if it had been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to make a choice. I could feel the oppressive weight of my memories dragging me back, but I had to fight against it. With a quick glance over my shoulder, I stepped outside into the cool night air, my heart pounding as I sprinted toward my car. The gravel crunched beneath my feet, a reminder of how vulnerable I truly was. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking as I struggled to unlock the door. But just as I got it open, a chilling realization struck me. I wasn't alone. A flash of movement caught my eye, and I turned to see him there, Max, stepping out from the shadows, his expression twisted into a sadistic grin. "You thought you could leave so easily," he taunted, his voice low and menacing. I froze, a paralyzing fear wrapping around me as the world around us dimmed, every sound fading into an eerie silence. In that moment, I felt time slow as I took in the full extent of my nightmare. The darkness that had haunted my childhood was no longer a distant memory, it was standing right in front of me, a tangible threat. I backed away, my pulse racing as I desperately searched for a way out. Without thinking, I lunged for the driver's seat, throwing myself inside and slamming the door shut. I fumbled for the ignition, my mind racing, but my hands were clumsy, trembling with terror. I glanced back at him, and in that fleeting moment, I could see the madness in his eyes, the thrill of the hunt playing out in the depths of his gaze. With a final burst of adrenaline, the engine roared to life, and I slammed the gear into reverse, tires screeching as I spun around. But as I glanced into the rearview mirror, a flash of light momentarily blinded me. My camera, the one I had left on the passenger seat, went off. The flash illuminated the darkness for just a heartbeat, capturing the twisted smile on Max's face. In that instant, everything felt surreal, as if the world had come to a standstill. The last thing I saw was him standing there, a silhouette against the night, the shadows embracing him like a cloak. And then, as I slammed the gas pedal and raced down the gravel drive, everything faded to black. The screen went dark, and I could only wonder what fate awaited me in the depths of the unknown, whether I would escape the nightmare or become just another victim in the twisted tale of my past.